My subject is very practical. It's, as said, what to do when matters go wrong. And the fact is, all service providers have a bad day, occasionally. Most of us have loved a restaurant in the good old days, and from time to time we sent the food back because the chef, I don't know, was not in a good mood that day. So the question really is not if a mistake will occur, but what to do when it happens. And this is two important elements. First of all, we want to keep our clients. I think we all agree that's the goal. But more than that, and it's very curious, is mistakes actually can improve our relations with customers. And I'll explain that in detail. My approach here is I'm going to introduce some basic ideas, some guidelines of how to deal with problems. Then I will present specific situations, offer a sort of a sample email, and then allow about 5 minutes or more or less if anybody wants to share their wisdom of how they dealt with a certain situation. All roads leads to Rome, so there are often many ways to solve a problem, and there are a lot of variables, and I'm not pretending to give you the only way to deal with the situation. I'm presenting me. So first of all, 1 second. All right, my background. Why do I dare give this lecture? My company is called Gaguzia Translations, which is mainly because it's very memorable. I've been a translator since 2004. I translate Hebrew, French, and Russian to English. I take what life gives me. I specialize legal and financial. I'm also an English lecturer at the Braude College of Engineering. But my main qualification is that when I began as a translator, I had never translated and I had never run a business. I had an MBA, but an MBA does not teach you how to run a business. So I made lots of mistakes. And I had to clean up my messes more often than I want to. But I sort of made a decision that I was going to make every mistake once. And that's a fairly good goal. All right. First of all is the emotional part of making an error. And they say to err is human, and it's true. And many people, when you realize you didn't get the document in time, you fouled up, you made an error, or maybe the other person made an error, you get very emotional. If you made the error, you may say you're stupid, incompetent, what are you doing there? People can get very angry at themselves for making an error. And the first part really is to accept that you're only as good as your last job, and everybody makes mistakes. Deal with it and go on. And that's all you can do. And to abuse yourself or get into depression for a week does not make the situation any better. And I think that's one of the key elements of dealing with errors. Accept it. You will make an error from time to time. Even people with more experience than I do have been in the business who are really good translators occasionally foul up. The next point is what are your expectations and what are the customer's expectations? Because fundamentally good and bad are relative. Let's take for an example, if it was a rush job, did you really expect you could do a perfect job or very close to perfect? Did their customer expect a perfect job? We have some problems with expectations here. And you need to see what is the best you can do under the circumstances. And you need to make it clear, because if you don't make it clear, you get a very upset customer. When something goes bad in any situation, you need to find a solution. Everything else is secondary. Find a solution. Who's right, who's wrong is not terribly relevant. You need to solve the problem, and you need to solve it quickly as possible. And your focus should not be on why you did it, at least initially, but what are you going to do about it? And finally, heuristics. Heuristics is a wonderful word for trial and error. Most of us learn by heuristics, and in running a business, the point of heuristics is very simple. Once is an accident, twice is a habit. Make sure it's not a habit. If something goes wrong, fix it and think, what can I do to reduce the possibility of it happening again or eliminate it? I'll take a personal example. Many of my errors have occurred when I've done same-day service. because the day I translate a document, I don't see certain aspects of the document. So my decision after once or twice I did this was, I do not do same-day service, point blank. I will deliver at 6 o'clock the next morning if I need to, but I will not do same-day service. So I stopped that problem. So heuristics is very important because you don't want to repeat the same error. It's really a habit and it should be avoided. Okay, I said the errors can bring you benefit, and I really mean it, because there is a concept called customer loyalty. Or if you want a nice definition of customer loyalty, the definition I give is, we prefer the devil we know over the devil we don't know. Now, what I mean is, if I know this company occasionally makes errors, but they'll back it up and they'll fix the problem, I know that. And I'll be loyal to them. And I think another way of looking at customer loyalty is the sort of a spectrum of inertia versus annoyance. We have enough decisions to make every day. We don't want to remake a decision. If you go to the same hairdresser or barber, you really don't want to consider that every time. If the person is doing a good enough job, then you say, okay, it's not worth putting any effort to find another one. However, if that same hairdresser destroyed your hair, you're so annoyed, you'll spend a half hour finding a better one. In any situation, we do not want to feed annoyance. We want to basically encourage inertia, not to change, so they don't try to find another translator. And once you do that, you create customer loyalty. And why is it so important? Because we are fundamentally a repeat business. It is very hard to get a first job, and we are dependent on sometimes a very limited number of customers. That means we hope, we expect they will come time after time. And every time you lose a customer, you are losing a business. And you know, there was a major department store chain which told its employees who earned commission that every customer was $3,000 a year. So if losing that customer meant losing $3,000 a year, that's what it meant. You must view it that way, and you must build customer loyalty. But curiously enough, customer loyalty is not actually made when they order your service the first time, because they can order from anybody. It's made actually when things go wrong. It's the office supply salesman who brings what they need the same day after they made a mistake. It's the tailor or the seamstress who takes you in and fix a seam they didn't do properly. And when they do it immediately, you don't even have to wait. They move everything behind you. And we say, okay, these people are human. They're not perfect, but you want to know something? They care about my business. So errors are not always negative events. You shouldn't try to make an error, but you can turn them into a very positive event in terms of customer loyalty. So that's why I say, in a certain sense, they're an opportunity to prove yourself, to prove that you are a good service provider. And a good service provider stands behind his or her word. Okay, there are individual factors how you handle a problem. The first one is language. There are two languages involved. The person who is the service provider who needs to deal with the situation, and the customer or the agency. If you're in the same country and both of you speak the same language, that's great. In general, you should try to work to the project manager or the customer language that they understand. In practice, once you leave Israel, almost everybody works in English. Now that poses an interesting issue, because many Israelis have no idea how to write a proper email in English, which sort of says you're sorry to the right degree and all those things to the right degree. It's not your native tongue in many cases. Israelis have different rules of politeness and the under message of what's being said. If you have a very delicate situation and you have to write a very delicate email in English, ask somebody to look at it. It's worth the time because it will save you a lot of other extra time. Okay, culture of apology. Every culture is different. The Japanese are very into apologizing. Canadians apologize when you step on their foot. My favorite Canadian joke: how do you get 50 drunk Canadians out of the pool? Politely ask them to leave. Okay? If you do not apologize to these cultures, you are rude. On the other hand, in the Middle East, if you apologize, you're weak. Okay? So you need to, when you consider how much to apologize, consider the culture. And if you need to ask, ask. Your history. Is this the first job with the customer? Is this your 100th job? Have you ever made a mistake before? Is this your first mistake? You need to consider the individual history to see how to handle it. And what's a little harder is the person of the client. Some clients are blunt, to the point, but they don't think personally. Other ones like things very objective. They don't want a big fuss. You can't always predict that one, but if you know, maybe you can take into account. Before we get into the generals and specifics, a few don'ts. And I mean don't, never. Number one, ignore. Work problems and translation problems are like medical problems. They don't go away. And if anything makes us annoyed is when somebody ignores us. They're not answering me. It doesn't go away. You get the person annoyed and you lose a customer. That's not the goal. It's not a good time. I don't have time. I'm busy. You made an error. Change your schedule. This has priority. Do not delay. How do you feel when you're very angry at someone and they don't talk to you for an hour? It makes you more angry. That's how your customers feel. Nasty email. Sometimes a customer makes us angry, very angry, like infuriated. Never write a nasty email to them. But I will give a proviso. If you are so angry you cannot think, write a nasty email, put it in, make sure it stays in your draft section, and say everything you want to say. You can question the parenthood of their parents, their grandparents, and anybody in their family. You can say anything you want, get your anger out of you, and then erase the email. Now you can deal with reality. It does help sometimes because sometimes you're too angry to think. Do not blame. In the solution stage, we do not blame. When you blame people, you get them angry. There's no purpose. In American English, it's CYA, cover your ass. If a service provider starts doing that routine, we get very upset. We're not interested in the initial stage whose fault it is. That's a discussion for later. Deal with the problem. So these are fours you should never do because they increase the annoyance. Okay. Now, methodology. I'm going to be writing email to a foreign or Western audience, which means they're in English. Israeli, I'm not Israeli. I don't express myself well in Hebrew, written Hebrew very well. I've lived in the country 30 years, but I'm not Israeli yet. Sorry. Make adjustments, and they'll according to the criteria. I will present the issue. I will suggest the steps, and I will present a very simple sample email. Then I'll give you a few minutes to someone how you might have handled the situation in the past. Okay, that is the term. That is the. I don't use it. I suggest not using the chat. Just unmute yourself and say, you know. Okay, the first one. Part of a project is out of your realm of knowledge. Let's give us some examples. In a medical document, there's all of a sudden several pages of legal conditions and liabilities and the like. Or you're translating a Israeli Supreme Court documents, which are 200 plus pages often, and in the middle they put 5 pages of biblical citations for their case. The second one has happened to me. I'm not an expert on biblical, and if it's a few paragraphs, you'll live with it, but if you've got 5 pages, it's not going to happen. So identify the problem means, is this a problem or can you cope with it? If you cannot cope with that, because you cannot, I cannot translate biblical Hebrew, or you don't know legal or anything like that, the first thing you do is to inform the customer there's a problem as soon as possible. Then provide options. What is the lesson? Always scan the whole text. This is an avoidable problem. It takes a few more minutes, but then again, losing a customer takes more minutes. So let me give an example. For those who, Dear John, a Dear John letter was a letter sent by World War II brides to their husbands in Europe fighting American, and saying, Dear John, you're away, I found another man. It was called a Dear John letter. Okay, how does this email work? First of all, I express the problem, okay? And then I would not be able to properly translate these pages. Okay, the client is not happy when they read that. Now, I immediately give an answer. I can outsource it, or you could take care of it. No problem in deadline. Okay, no problem in deadline. I'm not real happy, but apologize. I regret the inconvenience and will strive to prevent it from repeating. You're not saying what you're going to do. You're not going into detail. Please let me know how to proceed as soon as possible. Now, give me instructions. This is the letter I would send if I found myself in a unpleasant situation of having a section of a part of an email of a translation that I was unable to actually handle. Anybody ever experienced this? Anybody ever make this mistake? Okay. No one's ever done this? Oh, you're pretty lucky. Longer documents have these little secret hybrids. Go on.
Are you talking about it's a different subject hiding within the text?
Yes.
So what I usually do is I just scan the document before I accept the job. And then if I see that there's like technical terminology, then I usually ask in advance if anybody at the client will be able to help with technical terminology, because I tell the client that otherwise we'll have to look it up on the internet and consult with others, and it'll be very time consuming and hence more expensive.
That is clearly the best way to handle it. Reality says that on very busy days, we get a document and we do a sort of superficial scan, and on longer documents that can be very superficial. Oh, I'm familiar with this document. I have no problem. I can handle it. And you give a quote. We shouldn't do it, but as they say, there are bad days or days where you're not paying attention. I'm glad it never happened to anybody. I can't hear. Please raise the volume.
See how it scrolls to the people? You see this arrow here, Felice? On either side, you can scroll back and left and right. Then there's another way to set it up. You can see all the
Okay, someone's got the microphone on. Okay, so I'll go on to the next issue. Okay, this is a real fun one.
Sorry, could I just comment on the, if you could go back to the text
Certainly.
of your email.
Okay.
Okay. You also should say something about that the price is not going to be affected, because you're going to absorb the cost.
That's right.
Or you will, if the client is going to take it on, you will adjust downwards.
Yeah, that's right.
So give them the carrot as well as the stick. What else? There was one other thing. You should say, with your permission, I would need to outsource the translation, because it really depends on the client. They may say, no, I want you to do it, and I can't do it myself, so you know, you need to do it, and you know, so yeah. Please let me know how to proceed as soon as possible. You could actually add, in the meantime, I will continue with the other parts. In other words, so you can show that you are going to, you know, keep working and not just put the whole thing on hold until you get an answer.
Yeah, I agree. Those would be fair additions to it. I was trying to keep them fairly short for the purposes of this presentation, but those are excellent points you would add.
Yeah, I would probably say even further than perizomic, not even with your permission, unless you have another solution, I'll look for somebody to outsource it, because they probably have another person that can do it. So first it goes back to them, and only if they don't, if they ask me, then I'll look for someone to solve it, to also outsource it.
I agree. First of all, I would never outsource without permission. It's something I personally would never do. I think it's unprofessional. But yeah, but you have to give them that choice, in my opinion, because they need alternatives.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I tell them, if you don't have any alternative and the prerogative is yours, then I'll look for another solution.
Yeah. Very good. Again, the language can change and all that can change, but these are the ideas it should be. Okay, the next one is real nice. You did the translation, you put it in time, everything is great, but you missed something. And I can tell you personally what I once missed. On the Excel sheet on the bottom, there's sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, and guess what? I didn't look there. Can happen, unfortunate. Or on PowerPoint presentations, there are attached files I discovered. Those are real fun. They're not highly evident.
Those are very easy to me. And the extra tabs in the Excel.
Yeah, I'm not even saying these are, if you did this, you're unprofessional. I'm just saying you're human. Okay, you first of all, take on the task with the highest priority. You know, it's your error, you missed it, make your adjustments, but do it. Inform the customer of delivery deadline. And then I would say, figure out why it happened and adjust your work procedure. So at the first time and the only time I missed an Excel sheet, I said, okay, from now on, I check every Excel document if there's anything on the bottom there. It's on my procedure. It's automated. It's not dependent on my mood. Okay, so let's go look at an email. Again, I like my emails short because my customers don't really want to read long emails. Okay, I confirm that sheet 2 of the X file was not translated. I will begin the translation immediately and deliver it by tomorrow morning. I apologize for the error and will add a further check on Excel files to my QA process. I like my email short. That's the way I prefer to write. Anybody else have ever had to deal with this where you miss something?
I forgot a whole translation.
We'll get to that one. Michaela, we'll get to that one in a second.
Stephen, just on the previous email that you showed, yeah. I basically have a principle. I try never to say no to a client when I'm not able. So it could be for time or it could be for other reasons because that's not my field and they really want to stay with me. So I'm always bridging. When I have missed, on the one occasion I did miss a worksheet, it was a budget and an assets sheet, and I basically said, okay, well, let's do it. You go over my budget sheet and I immediately will get onto the assets sheet, and that way we'll meet up. So they really like that.
Okay. As long as the customer's happy, right?
Yeah,
happier.
Exactly.
Happier, excuse me, happier. They're not happy about any of this. Okay, anybody, is there any other type of file which has a tendency for something to be lost lost in translation, we say? These are
sometimes there are word files where there are multiple paragraphs with very similar structure, wording, and it's if you're working with the two screen method, you may accidentally leave out a paragraph or two because that one was the one I was working on. That's happened to me. Sometimes it can be a single line from a paragraph where the same word appears in two consecutive lines in exactly the same place.
Yeah, and it was 10 o'clock in the evening and tired, which has a lot of fun.
I sometimes forgot whole attachments because, sometimes when you have a lot of attachments, you have to scroll through them, and I didn't. So I just took the first one that I saw and ignored all the rest. So that was...
I've done all of the above.
Guess what?
With regard to attachments, actually the safest thing is to save all attachments into a folder and then start, working on the quote rather than looking at them in the email, and that usually solves that problem.
Like Stephen said, I try to do each mistake only once. So.
Yeah, that's about as I say. That's about as best as we can do. We can get creative over time. Okay. So in second, all right, this one is what Michaela brought up. You never did it. And this is probably our worst moment. And you never recorded it, or it got lost, or it came late at night. And I sort of say, apologize, prioritize, and deliver. And check your work, your procedures. If you have to make, every time you get a job, it goes into some Excel, or it goes into some list, or it goes into something. This should not happen, and it's a really good way to lose a customer. So what do we do here? Admit it. Say, I'm immediately starting the project, and you give the fastest possible delivery. Apologize. I deeply regret it. Apologize again. Thank you for your patience. And again, I'm assuming a Western culture where you have to apologize a lot. And that's about as the most you can do in this situation. And maybe you won't lose your customer. Michaela, how did you deal with it? You said.
It was worse because it was a friend. I was in a business network thing, and he needed this information for a deadline, and of course I did it as soon as I could, and I didn't charge him because it was a big job. But he forgave me. In my defense, I was in mourning at the time, and the thing is, if you're in mourning, you think your head is working, but actually it isn't. So that was a very rocky time. That was like the worst thing that I did. So it was very bad that it was to somebody I knew personally, but on the other hand, he was very understanding. But I really, really try not to do that. Of course, now I have no excuse. I'm just getting old and forget stuff all the time. So I really, really, really try and make sure I've written everything down.
Anybody else willing to admit that they forgot something? Yeah.
I did. The client said, so when are you going to have that ready? And I'm like, 2 days. And I realized, I made a mistake. It was many years ago. I had little kids. There was a snowstorm and they were at home. They couldn't go to school and they kept on going out and getting all their clothes wet. And I was just like so overwhelmed. And I realized that it slipped my list or my mind, and I had to sit like all night or something and catch up without letting her know that I actually didn't even start, but I caught up. It was awful.
If you can do it without failing at the deadline, that's the best. I want to go on here. Extraordinary events. Force majeure, they say in the wonderful legal language. You got a really bad cold in the middle of a project. Remember, your family got hospitalized. It's distressing, but it's a fact of life. Sometimes we can't do our work. We'd have no control over it. So I always say, inform your customer and give a worst case scenario. Don't be optimistic, be pessimistic. And provide options. Now, I said less and don't get sick, question mark. That's a joke. Obviously, we have no power over these. That's why they're force majeure. So back to another Dear John. I have to inform you, I have severe bronchitis. By the way, don't cry wolf. Never use this unless it's real. Okay, otherwise you lose your credibility, which is a big thing to lose. It says, I can do it 1 week from now. Now give them a choice. I can expand the deadline, or I'll give you whatever I have and find somebody else. But that's the best you can do in the situation. And if it's a force majeure, most customers will understand that you really, it's not your fault. Anybody ever find yourself, I'll tell you briefly my short incident. I was sharing a very large project with another translator, and we were doing it 50-50, and he disappeared on me for a week. His father was dying in Florida, and he got off email. And I wrote these pleading emails. Send me whatever you have. Just let me know what's going on. And I ended up losing the customer because they were unhappy because half the translation wasn't done. It wasn't my fault, but I learned my lesson. Anybody ever have to deal with an unpleasant surprise?
I had found that clients had set my deadlines, and then they didn't meet theirs. And of course it came back, a couple of days before Pesach, and there was just no way I could complete it. So I phoned them and I explained that, they were 3 weeks late, and I wasn't going to, put everything 3 weeks late, but my hands were pretty much tied. And after that, I do an email agreement where I say, this schedule is dependent on client and myself meeting our deadlines, and we're both obviously only human, something like that. We might be ill for a week, and we have to allow for that, and the whole schedule will have to move down. So accordingly, and it's not my fault as a contractor. It's not, and the client, I'm not liable, and the client's not liable if they miss something. They also have personal life, Basically, I write it in somewhere before I take a major project on, because I don't want to go through that again. They started picking on the payment and how many hours and the extra work that they needed, and it's just not worth it. So I set it all down when I do the estimate, what the schedule ought to be, and it is up to they have a side in keeping it as well, and I will allow for them and they will allow for me.
Yep. Anybody else ever had an unpleasant surprise? Any other contribution?
But what I want to say is this is exactly the type of situation where a network is useful. Because
that's true.
If heaven forbid something happens, you're ill, somebody dies, so you refer the job to somebody else.
That's what I was going to say. I had someone else do it. I just did the quality control and sent it, and then I just paid the other person what they paid me.
Those are good solutions. Again, but the clear communication with the customer is really important. They're willing to understand, but you have to explain what's going on in sort of an objective way. Okay, I want to do 2 more before we go because they're more relevant. Okay, you're going to miss the deadline. This never happens to anybody. I know this. It's obvious. You give as early notice as possible. You may want to talk about compensation. It's really dependent on the situation, but you always allow fudge time in scheduling. You allow for unpleasant surprises in the translation, things taking longer than expected. It's nice when it's the other way around, but it doesn't always work that way. Okay, I don't even bother to really explain. I said I will be unable to meet the deadline because of technical issues with the text. they don't really want to know what the issues are. Okay, they're issues. Instead, we'll deliver 1 day late. Sorry, it's going to be 1 day late. All right, I'll provide a quality product and apologize for any inconvenience. I keep it short. They're not going to be happy with me. You can discuss maybe reducing the payment afterwards. But I think what the customer wants at this stage is to know they're going to get the translation. Is that your experience, or do you handle this mess differently?
I agree. You need to let them know where they stand and tell them that's life. That's the way it's going to be.
Any other?
Yeah. Also, if I see that we're going to be late, I try to ask for an extension before the deadline has expired.
Yes.
So if, for instance, the job is due, say, in 3 days' time, and I need 5 days, then I'll ask already for 5 days, so that if it's really impossible for the client, then, you know, whatever, we'll work around the clock, or...
Yes.
But I do that.
I found that many times if you ask time in advance, they say, sure, no problem.
Deadlines are not real.
But it's also happened to me that they agreed to the 5-day sort of extension, and then 2 days later asked for the job the same day, which was earlier than the original schedule.
Hey, good surprises are always welcome. It's bad surprises which get people upset. I don't like going, first of all, I have to say that in 16 years, I've missed 2 deadlines, one because of the guy who disappeared. I don't remember the other one. But it was out, you know, it was out of my, it was a document that I didn't read properly. But, you know, does anybody else found go into detail and explain why they can't deliver on time?
I'm very, you know, part of my business philosophy is to be as reliable as possible. So your lesson here of, you know, fudging the schedule, in other words, having a buffer zone. Very often my price, you know, my work suggestion is you will have it no later than.
Correct, I agree.
And I leave myself time. And if they need a rush job, then maybe I won't take it. But because I'm one of these people that if I get very tired, I cannot work. I'm not one of these people, so I'll just have a cup of coffee and I'll work through the night. I may be well-intentioned, but my brain goes to sleep. So I always add that little padding to the schedule, and you will have it no later than.
Yeah,
that's my solution.
I agree, because I know that at a certain point, whatever any work I do, I will have to redo in the morning. It's straightforward. It's not. It's such garbage quality that I'll redo it anyway. So why do it? Yeah, I negotiate deadlines more than price. Personally, I don't work well under stress, and I avoid stress as much as possible. But some people love stress. I understand. Okay. All right. I'm going to add one more because I know your time is important. And this is the most annoying one. Customer dissatisfaction with the translation. Actually, one more after this, if Lori says, how we have the time, I'll do it. You get these general comments or very specific client comments. And there is a process to deal with this. Calm down. Whatever you need to do, calm down, because at that point, you're going, who's the idiot who introduced mistakes? Okay, we tend to get really angry when someone ruins our work. Then after you calm down, reread the email maybe 3 times and see exactly what they're talking about, because I don't read Hebrew very well when I'm very angry. I see the first sentence and that's it. And then review the document coolly and calmly. Respond to all specific remarks or a large sample of them. because sometimes documents are clearly very large. In other words, deal with the issue, even if it is a waste of your time, annoying, and you have much better things to do with your time. And I think there's some lessons here. First of all, you may need to improve your QA process. You may need to check the customer return base, because some of the problems were highly avoidable. And you have to be aware of expectations. I'll give an example of a customer I lost. Some guy needed his play script translated like in 48 hours. And I can't write, it was basically an impossible task I took on. And all I could do was a first draft. And I don't hand people first drafts. And he was not very happy. So what I'd say about expectations is, you want this in 48 hours, you're going to get as is. It's like buying a car, okay? If they really insist on it. So maybe that's what I learned on that one. Okay. This is written, of course, when you're completely angry. So it's the opposite. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you, my foot. I've taken a look at the customers. I will send a detailed response within 1 day. Meaning I'm not going to really, this is not a good time. Please be assured that we both seek customer satisfaction in a proper translation. The project manager is on your side, okay? It's short, because if I go into great detail about why the customer doesn't know the language, it's not going to help me. How do other people deal with customer complaints?
I just apologize. I tell them that I'll look over it again. I ask them to give me any specific things that they were unhappy with, so that I know what to focus on. And basically, I just try to be very polite and send them a revised version as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's about as what you can do. Even when most of the revisions are wrong, are stylistic or mistakes. Anybody else ever?
You want the customer to be happy.
I can tell you, and I'm telling my clients as well. And first of all, I calm myself. I take 3 deep breaths, and then I tell them that we have a very organized dispute process.
Okay.
We don't jump into conclusion. We would like to receive a specific feedback from the reviewer, and then we check everything and we provide a very organized, you can call it bug report or something like that, that summarize their comments and our version, and then they get an empirical report showing everything.
Yeah, I mean, the customer gets what they want. They get an answer. They can't complain that you were ignoring them. They may not be happy. And even if, yes, the translation was terrible for whatever reason, for an agency might have that problem more, at least they got proper service, and maybe they'll forgive us, maybe. All right, I'll do one more because it's one of the most, yes.
Okay, this last one, but it's
the last one. Promise, last one.
We really need to go to break, the lunch break.
I know. Okay, post-delivery changes. Isn't that nice after you did the translation and said, oh, the customer made a few changes. Thank you. Couldn't you have done this beforehand? Okay, you need to assess it and take a position. I'm not into great apology, I'm willing to bend, but only so much. By the way, when I do editing work, I always write to my customers, the price includes 1 round of queries. Okay? In other words, I tell the customer in advance, we're not going to spend 10 months going over this document. I'm going to send the document. You have questions. I'll go over it once. Afterwards, you pay for it. That's how I avoid the problem in editing. Okay? I reviewed the changes. Document 1 is fine. Document 2, sorry, that's several hours work. You'll pay me for that. Let me know how we're going to go on. As I say, I'm willing to be flexible. I'm willing to give good service, but I'm not willing to, as they say in Hebrew, to be a flyer, to be a sucker. Where is that line? Everybody has a different line. Anybody ever had to deal with these issues?
I'll mute myself. I deal with it the whole time. I do a lot of financial statements. At this time of the year, I'm just literally working 18-hour, 19-hour days. So in order to fit everybody in, I know in advance when everybody's deadlines are, and I get them to send it to me as early as possible. They all go through a couple of rounds of approvals and there's changes. And I just say the first round we'll do by the word, and from then onward it's by the hour.
Very good. There's no surprises. You create the expectations and there's no unhappiness. Anybody else have another way of dealing with this? Anybody refuse it?
I have, it depends what it is. I will also tell them there'll be 1 or 2 rounds, but I charge for those. And because sometimes it's enormously long phone calls, but we want now to move this, we want to do that, and things like that, and they haven't got time to write it down on a big project like a book or something.
Yeah.
And I'm spending hours going through making new instruction files. In section 3, we've now put it into A to H, and we've expanded it. And we want you to go through just that section, but then please go back and see that it fits in with everything else. So it's all done by time, and everything is yes, except that it's always comes in when somebody else's work has just come in, it's urgent. But it's always a yes, and what's your deadline, and that they're going to be charged for it by time. But basically I tell them, you know, I sit down and I write you a detailed report on what I've done and the major changes and my questions. That's all my working time, and I'm charging for that too. And they get used to working with me that way, and it makes sense because that's in their kind of world, especially when it's editing, yes. Which a lot of us is. But sometimes it's not. I mean, you can go through 5 or 10 changes of a document because it's been revised by a committee of camels, and it's all translation. Yes. So and they don't highlight it, and they have to go find the changes, and they didn't put tracks in. So, yeah.
But that's very
difficult. Clients, then I've got to be nice about it. I do ask them to use tracks, but they don't always. Sometimes they do.
Gillian, I never trust their changes anyway. I run my own comparison to the document that I know that's the version that we translated. And I'll find even if they'd send me track changes, I never trust them to have tracked everything, because they frequently make changes without tracking them.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, there's a lot of time, and it's labor intensive, and especially when it's legal, it's hugely important to get it absolutely right. And the quality control has to be done not at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah, I will push a deadline from 8 till the morning to 10. So 10:30. Is it okay if I send it at 10? No matter what, just to keep them happy, but to give me my time to rest and review before I send it in with errors.
I'm going to go to the conclusion, and I'll stay online a little bit here. Okay, what did I say? What is my summary? Stay cool. Analyze the situation, respond promptly, solve the problem, and learn from errors. It's my hope that if for most of your experienced ones here at the conference, but maybe gave you some ideas how to handle the problems and maybe not make errors. And anybody who's interested in some of the slideshow, let me know. I'll be very happy to send it to you. I
will be happy to add small thing if I may.
No problem.
Since I represent the LSP point of view here, I'm always on the set of mind of collaborating and cooperating with the client, with the vendors. I'm always the man in the middle, and I try to negotiate between the fury of the client or the specific need of the client and the fury of the vendor. But we're always here to support each other. We are here to support our end client. The vendor is always a client from my point of view, because we want to work together to achieve a purpose. And Your tips are very valuable, and I want us to summarize it that we are working together, not against each other.
Agree. Agree. The project manager is in between, and I never try to put a project manager as the enemy. If you go through an agency, they're not the enemy. They are truly in the worst position here of anybody, in my opinion. Very good then. I'm going to stop share. And I wish everybody have a nice lunch. How about that?